Sound.
Got it, I heard that.
All right, I'm gonna slate. You're done?
Yeah.
Then he'll brief you, don't worry.
Patrick talks a lot too, don't worry.
Okay, and you'll have to
Raise
talk
it up,
loud
Karen.
because I can't. Okay.
Okay. Raise it up a little bit more. Okay. And call it.
Interview Harlan Chapman, take one.
Okay.
Yeah, so Harlan, the entire time you're gonna look at Patrick.
Okay.
I don't exist.
Okay.
I'm the invisible man.
First of all, thank you so much for being willing to do this. Yesterday was my birthday, my 66th birthday, and spending part of it with you and Fran was an honor, and it was a great way to bring in another year into the world. So thank you.
Well, thanks.
There are no right or wrong answers here. This is the story of your life and of your experiences. So whatever you remember, if you stumble in a memory, it doesn't matter. You know, what matters is we get a chance to get a sense of who you are.
Okay.
And I read, it was so touching to read the article in which they interviewed your stepchildren and who talked about you with such respect and admiration. And at some point I'd like to ask you about those things, but it warms me as a father to hear that and to know that the respect of your children is hard won and well won, and when you have it, you've earned it. So thank you, sir.
Okay.
So let's start off with what were the first inspirations for you toward leaning toward a military life?
Oh, the family had been very military. My dad had been in the military. My brother-in-law was military. My uncle was military. My great-grandfather was in the Civil War, and I had a great-great-grandfather that was with Washington and at Valley Forge. So the military has been a big part of my life.
Wow. Tell me about your dad.
Well, my dad, I never found out why, but he had two brothers. He was the oldest. But when he was 15, this was in WW1, he ran away from home. And as far as I know, it was a happy home. But he ran away and joined the Navy. And he did very well, but during the war. By the time he was 21, he was a Navy chief. And he was home on Liberty and met my mom. And they decided to get married, and so he decided to get out of the Navy. At 21, a Navy chief. But he always loved the Navy. And of course, he always loved my mom, so. That's his, but he was always very patriotic. We always help him raise the flag in front of the house on holidays and 4th of July and such. And,
What did your dad teach you about your country, about the military? Were there ways in which he inspired you?
Always very, well, some people say thought he was the most patriotic person that they'd ever met. And he was a very decent person. He helped out. He had friends in the Jewish community. He had there was a black fellow that he helped get his driver's license back after he was picked up trash and lost his driver's license, and Dad helped to get it back. So, it was at that time he was just a really progressive, nice person.
Wow. And do you remember when you made the decision to enter the Marine Corps or enter pursuit of military education or whatever? Did you have a conversation with your dad about it?
No, not really, because I was looking for a scholarship because I knew finances weren't, that strong in the family. They came through the Depression and everything, and it was tough then. And so realized that a scholarship would help. So I got the scholarship to the NROTC. And as far as at the end of my sophomore year, when I had to make the decision between staying with the Navy or switching to the Marine Corps, we had 2 cruises during the summer, one to to Norway, and then one to Little Creek, Virginia, and Corpus Christi, Texas. When I got a chance to see both the Navy and the Marine Corps operated, I thought I liked the Marine Corps operation better, so I chose the Marine Corps.
What was it about the Marine Corps that appealed to you?
I don't know, it's a young kid. Maybe it was the Navy name and the glory, and maybe they had better advertisements. I don't know.
Great. So, how did your life begin as a Marine aviator?
Oh, well, when I graduated, went to basic school for 9 months, Marine Basic School. I was commissioned when I graduated in 1956, in June of '56, as a second lieutenant in the Marine Corps. And all Marines go through basic school. At that time, I also got married to a lady from Hammond, Indiana that I knew at college. We went to college together. So anyway, after graduation, I went to basic school for 9 months at Quantico, Virginia. And that's where the Marine Corps teaches lieutenants how to be enlisted. No, they teach them how to lead, what the enlisted man goes through. It's a very good, plus there's intellectual part, and all it's very well programmed, and it's something that all second lieutenants go through. And then I was decided to go to aviation, and was fortunate enough to pass the physical. You know, a lot of people wash out because of eyesight or other things, so after graduation from basic school, the following spring, started out at Pensacola area in pre-flight, and then after that I went to Corpus Christi, Texas, actually Kingsville, Texas, for advanced flight training, and that's where I got my wings in October of 1958, actually September of '58. Fortunately, my folks were able to come down and see, and my wife were able to come down and see me get the wings.
Was that a proud moment for you?
Beg pardon?
Was that a proud moment for you, your dad seeing you get your wings?
Oh no, it was great. He was very proud of me.
Yeah.
And even my mother and my sister that didn't like me going to the Marine Corps were happy to see me get the wings, because their son-in-law that married my sister was 9 years older than I was, so I grew up with 2 mothers. But anyway, he was a WW2 pilot, World War II, and he had 50 missions over Italy and Germany in a bomber. He was a pilot, and that sort of helped me get into the piloting, because he took me up flying a couple times when I was in college.
Do you remember any particularly inspiring things about leadership you learned in Quantico, in your Marine training, that served you throughout?
Well, my dad had some good lessons. He says, it's in the Marine Corps Army, it's the sergeants that run things, and in the Navy, it's the chiefs. And you don't want to give that chief or that sergeant a hard time, because they probably just got off the racquetball court with the captain. So, they're the strength. They get stuff done. So, be very careful of how you treat your enlisted, and that carried me through.
Beautiful. So you were at one point assigned to the Oriskany.
Yes.
Talk to me about that.
Okay, that's a little bit of a long story. I was in an F-8 squadron on Hawaii, Kaneohe Bay, Hawaii, and the Navy was transitioning from the F-8 Crusader, which was the plane I was flying, to the F-4. And the Oriskany was one of the earlier end of the WW2 carriers. It wasn't that big, and it wasn't really capable of handling an F-4 aircraft, which was a little bit bigger than the F-8. It took up more space. So they were short of a squadron for the deployment of the Oriskany. And so they tagged the squadron I was in Hawaii to fill in and join the Oriskany. So to join the air wing. So we were the only Marine squadron on the ship.
And talk to me about the deployment of the Oriskany. What were its orders?
Well, it started off, initially, every time a carrier came through Hawaii, we got to fly out and get some build-up traps on the carrier, because you need to build up, might say a little bit about flying aboard a carrier with the F-8 Crusader. It was a Mach 1 aircraft with a very powerful engine, but the engine was slow to wind up. So when you're coming aboard a carrier like on the Oriskany, our hook to ramp clearance was only about 7 to 10 feet. So with the deck going up and down, such as things were very, very critical at that time. That's where the landing signal officer with the paddles and such was very critical, because he could pick up if you're sinking too fast or you're too fast or too high, and help talk you in. So we had a lot of workups to get ready to go on. And then we had to fly from Hawaii back to Ohio to pick up a new version of the F-8 that was going to go on the ship. This new version could carry 2,000 pounds on wing attachments. So anyway, we went back to San Diego, picked up the new birds, and went back to Hawaii and said goodbye to the family and headed off. And we got to the off of South Vietnam in May of 1965.
Wow. By the way, as you see from the air conditioning, I have a little bit of a chest cold, sir. So occasionally, if I have to cough, I'll put my hand up for a moment.
And you want me to shut up, I bet.
No, you don't have to. We'll just pick it up. Unfortunately,
I'll cough back, okay?
Yeah, maybe we could time our coughs together and that
Okay.
way. So I apologize, but the air conditioning always does.
I forgive you.
Yeah. So you were running sorties off of the Oriskany.
Right.
Over, I'm assuming the areas between.
Okay, when we initially got there, we flew missions south of the DMZ, and that was May, and the carrier was out in the Gulf and Tonkin, fairly close to, not too far offshore. And there were forward air controllers down there, because it was in South Vietnam, and there were all the friendlies down there, but there were terrorists, there were North Vietnamese that had filtered down and were causing havoc down there, and the locals were having trouble, so they needed air support. So because of working so close to friendly, when we went in, we would contact an aircraft, he would be in a small aircraft, and he was very slow, and he could direct us in as far as what direction and where to drop either bombs or just a strafe. And so about, for almost 2 months, we didn't fly north of the DMZ. And every week, the intelligence officer would brief us about what the fortifications were in North Vietnam. And every week there would be a new SAM, Service Air Missile Site, being constructed around Hanoi. And it wasn't until Hanoi was pretty well covered with with those that they finally let us fly north of the DMZ. Do you want me to get in a little bit of politics here?
It's up to you, sir.
Okay, well, the administration sort of had not the military, but the Johnson and McNamara, particularly McNamara, because of his success with the Tonkin Gulf incident, or not the Tonkin, the Cuban Missile Crisis, felt that just a little pressure and the North would crumble. Well, he should have read the North Vietnamese newspapers. They weren't going to crumble. They were definitely in for the long haul, and they were smart enough to realize that the U.S. wasn't, and that they could win the war in D.C. And if the State Department and such had read the Vietnamese newspapers, and they would have, they wouldn't have gotten us in the mess that they got us into. And because war is nasty, brutal, nasty. If you're going to do it right. Don't do it half-assed. Well, McNamara's thing was to do it half-assed, just do a little bit, and then stop, and then well, no, they didn't cave. Maybe we'll do a little bit more. Then okay, that doesn't. There's an excellent book that was written by McMasters, who for a short period of time worked for Trump, called Dereliction of Duty, and it was how they let Lyndon Johnson sort of smooth them and didn't do what was right by what they should have done. So that's the end of my politics.
But it's a very important thing, because it is something every person in the military faces at one point or another. Is
Yes.
that you have taken an oath to serve the country and the commander-in-chief.
Yeah.
And at times, you're seeing things on the ground that vary widely from their perception of things.
Well, something like when we were bombing down, they were more interested in the number of bombs that we dropped but not having good targets. Not having like Haiphong Bay and different things up north that would have strategically been good, instead of dropping bombs in the south. But they were sort of graded on the number of bombs that was dropped and not what was accomplished. It's the same way as they had the body kill as far as on a shore. There was more interested in the number of bodies that were counted than how good the particular operation worked.
If you could speak to a young officer in training today, or even a young enlisted person, and given your experience, given the things that you went through in Vietnam, how would you advise them to look at when their perception of their duty is in conflict with what the politicians or the people at the Pentagon are perceiving? How would you instruct them?
Oh, you still have to follow your boss. You're still, in the military, it's not, you can't go on strike. So you just have to pray that from the top down, the leaders are good, and that's all you can hope for. And we had some excellent leaders in the POW camp with Stockdale and Robbie Reisner. They were really great as far as, but it all goes on. And even in the POW camp, there was a senior officer of each building, and actually a senior officer in each room. And so when anything went, there were camp rules. And I might touch on this in just a second, because it's really pissed me off about our president, about McCain. McCain was just really beat up bad when he ejected and such, and he was really hurt. And the V knew about his old man being head of the Pacific as far as the military. And they offered him the opportunity to go home early. The only thing he had to do was to write a little bit of being against the war, because after the initial interrogation, the only thing that the North Vietnamese wanted from the POWs was anti-war statements, the same stuff that the congressmen and Jane Fonda and such were putting out in the U.S. That's what we were being tortured for. But McCain didn't, and the rule that was put out by Stockdale and Robert was sick and injured first, and then the first shoot downs are the first out, first in, first out. So, And so McCain turned it down even though he was beat up and just brutally hurt. And so, you know, I have greatest respect for McCain, and I have no respect for the president.
Thank you, sir.
I don't mind you, I hope you don't mind me getting a little politics in there.
I couldn't agree with you more, so
Okay.
no.
Okay, we're on this.
I have to be very careful in this project to never state my political views. But when someone invites it, then I get to say,
Okay.
how did we get where we are today
Okay.
when we've had so many great leaders before
Okay,
us?
well, I had to get that in about McCain because it's really pissed me off.
Yeah, and understandably.
I never lived with McCain, but I was in the same camp with him and knew about him through the code and such that we had. And then I got to meet him when we first got out for a short period of time, and then I campaigned for him.
Right. So let's talk about your shoot down. What was happening that day? What are your memories?
Oh, well, we were moved north and we were flying on primarily infrastructure, bridges and such, so all the supplies and such that were coming from the north through China, everything like between Russia and China, they had anti-aircraft guns that were radar controlled to 35,000 feet. So besides the triple SAMs that they got from Russia, they had very sophisticated anti-aircraft, which is why we lost so many planes there. But anyway, flying up north. Do you want me to go into my shoot down? Are you ready for that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. It was there was a bridge between Hanoi and Haiphong that crossed this stream there, and they wanted to knock that bridge out. The A4s that were doing most of the bombing were a small airplane and couldn't carry 2,000-pound bombs, and so they were having trouble knocking out some of these steel bridges. Well, the F-8 was a support aircraft that we covered going in to support the A4s on missions to keep the bad guys away from them. They turned us into bombers because we had the capability of carrying a 2,000-pound bomb on each wing. And because of the weight and everything else, we couldn't take it off with a full fuel load. So we had to take off with a light fuel load, and after we took off, hook up with an airborne tanker and fill up with tanks. So we had to do that. And this was a big mission. There were about 12 planes involved in it, and I was in a division of 4. I forget who the division leader was now, but we went in and we made the target, and with no problems. There was some AAA coming in, but nothing significant. And I went and we went in low, and then we popped up, and I was number 4 of the division, and went in, and on my way down, just before I released the bombs, the airplane got hit, and I lost control. I got rid of my bombs, lost control of the plane. The plane was sort of tumbling, just, nothing with a stick. And I thought I was going to die. I reached for the curtain over your head that you pull to ejections. I couldn't get my arms up because of the G-forces. I don't remember how I got out of the plane. I must have gone, there's an overland handle between the legs. I must have gone to that, or the plane blew up and blew me up. But the next thing I remember, I'm in the chute coming down, and they're still far out of me. And I had to stoop out of the frying pan into the fire as I'm coming down in the chute. Anyway, I landed in a rice paddy up to my knees in mud, and there were some villagers that were around, and there were a couple probably National Guard type troops or something that were there, and so I was captured right away. There was no way I was going to get anywhere. It was out of, foot deep in mud. And but fortunately, the reconnaissance plane did pick me up in my chute. So at least,
You know what, there's a jet going overhead right now. I'm just gonna ask you to pause for one moment while the jet goes overhead.
Okay.
Because I wanna really get this on.
okay, I can
recording.
follow. Well, okay.
And he
Well, I
should-
can-
should
I
back
can-
up to when he first ejected.
If you turn this off, so I can tell you about later. This something was very nice and such to have a dry fart with all the diarrhea. Oh, hey.
I totally understand. Almost done, almost going overhead. It's just fascinating, yeah. Bill was working with an older actor one day who turned to him and said something along the lines of, Bill, when you get to my age, you never pass up the opportunity to use a bathroom, and you never trust a fart.
Right.
True story. True story.
Okay.
So have him go back.
So let's go
where he
back to when you ejected. You weren't
Oh.
sure how you tried to pull the canopy release. It didn't work, and
Right.
then,
Okay. But I'm coming down. They're shooting at me, and I run in the rice paddy, and I think, and I'm captured right away. And there was no way I was going to get away. And they initially had me stripped down to my shorts, and they put me in a jeep, and they paraded me in a couple different villages. I wasn't too far from Hanoi, and by the evening I was in Hanoi in the Hanoi Hilton, and that's when I went through with the. I wasn't tortured before then. They weren't happy with me, but they weren't torturing me before. But when I got to Hilton, was put in this room and had legs and leg irons, and my arms tied behind me. When I ejected, this right arm must have got caught because I had a partial shoulder separation. You know, it wasn't. I could raise my arm about this high as all, and it wasn't a lot of pain, but I knew it wasn't right, you know, because it was way down. Anyway, ended up in Rome, and two V officers come in and start asking me military questions, and I say name, rank, service number, and they say that's not good enough, and so they tied my arms tightly behind my back, and with the shoulders pulled back, with the leg irons, so you're sitting up, and I keep, refusing to. And they pull out a gun and threaten to shoot me, and I still name, rank, and service number. But after a while, the pain got so bad I knew I had to do something. So they started off with who was in your squadron. So I gave them names like Tom Mex, Clark Gant, Gary, Gary, just all sorts of false names like that. And that went on for too long, and but I felt like hell that I stopped, not sticking with name, rank, and service number. You just, you feel like you've really failed. If I was tough enough, I would have. And anyway, that on went for quite a while, and then I was taken there and put in a cell by myself, and went from there. You want me to continue?
well, this brings up a place that is, in fact, Carrie, would you mind just closing that door? Because I think that's open and it's bringing in a lot more sound.
And do you want me to speak up? I can speak up louder if you need it.
Oh, the mic is getting you perfect.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're hearing you fine, sir.
It's absolutely, so whatever is comfortable.
Oh, this
speaking
is fine.
Great. Each of the former POWs that we talked to, and one of the things that gave birth to this project was the extraordinary, in the military they talk about that they're looking at some of the roots of PTSD, and in the military
Right.
they talk about moral injury.
Right.
that recovery from moral injury is a huge factor
Yeah.
in recovery from PTSD. And each of the former POWs speaks about the moral injury they felt when, under the face of this enormous pain, they were forced to give more than name, rank, serial number. And to varying degrees, that pain, some were given the grace of early communication with other POWs who were able to console them and say, listen, this is, we're all together. But some were left, one of the things the Vietnamese understood implicitly was you had very little military intel to give them. Pilots by design are only given a few days of mission, and then after that you don't have advanced understandings of the aircraft or anything like that. So, as you said, they were interested in getting propaganda, but more key, they understood that if they could force you to give up more than name, rank, and serial number, the worst thing they would do to you was put you in a cell alone and let you sit in that.
Right.
And that's the moral injury in the beginning of either a downhill or an uphill turn. And I want to focus on that a little bit because someone got to you at some point. Speak to me, sir.
Well, I was only in this cell by myself for 2 days. And they came back a couple of times and tried to get more out of me, and I stuck with, that they knew that I was a Marine, but I was flying Navy aircraft, and so they would ask me something about the Marine Corps, and I'd say I was with the Navy. They'd ask me something military about the Navy, I said, I don't know, I was with the Marine Corps, and that confused the hell out of them. But it sort of saved me from getting, because they couldn't get anything out of me because I could say, hey, I don't know. I wasn't with the Navy. Oh, hey, I was with the Marine Corps, vice versa. And it was, fortunately, I don't know how I thought it up, but it worked. Something simple. And then after 2 days, I went into the cell block. There was about 8-10 cells, and got to talk to some other POWs, including Stockdale. There were 1 or 2 man cells, and they were across from each other, and they were very small and such, but you could stand on your bunk and look through the grate there, and you could see the POW right across from me. That was Duffy Hutton, and Stockdale was down to the right, and Harry Jenkins also, he was the CO of an A4 squadron in Rusk, and he was in the cell next to me. And that's when I found out that everybody had, they had gotten to everybody. So,
speak to me, if you would, sir. Describe that. You were forced to give more than name, rank, and serial number.
Right.
You were taken back to your cell. I assume at this point you didn't know the TAP code. So you were put in this group of cells with other shoot downs.
right.
Describe that evening.
Well, misery loves company, and they didn't. The thing was, we weren't supposed to talk to each other, so there was only a short period of time when the guards weren't around that they take big siestas that we could communicate a little bit, and there wasn't just not a lot to talk about. It's just you're there, and there's no. It was actually sort of in a way a lonely time, even though you finally, it was great to talk to someone and find out their stories, and all the stories were basically the same. So.
And what do you recall about whose voice did you hear first when you were brought to your cell?
Duffy Hutton's, because he was right across the cell from me, and I got up on my bed and I could look across and see him. And then Stockdale's voice came in from down to the right.
And what did they say to you? Did they reach out to you first?
Oh, boy. It was just a few words at a time initially, and then I got the words from them as far as when it was safe to talk, because Otherwise, the Vietnamese had very strict rules about not communicating with other POWs.
Yes, yeah. There's a story that I've heard told, and I'm wondering, I think it happened, was this Heartbreak where you were?
Yes, heartbreak.
In Heartbreak. I
Right.
believe it was a story that Orson told, that a number of you were communicating, and Stockdale had been brought in down the hall, and you were seeking guidance and leadership. What should we do? What are we, and I think it was Orson said, let me ask the old man. And he called down to Stockdale and said, we need directives. We need leadership. What are your commands? Because as military men, the first thing would be to just find out who's senior, right?
Right.
That's the very first question
Yes.
you ask after what's your name.
Yeah.
Yeah. Were you part of this story? Because what I heard, and I'm going to ask Orson about it when we meet up with him in a couple of weeks, but what I heard was Orson said, let me ask the old man, and Stockdale, who had been brutally tortured and was in a lot of pain, later on, when you all made it back to Camp Unity, Orson went up to Stockdale and said, that night at Heartbreak, you kept me going. I was at a real low. I wanted to give up. And when you spoke up from down the hall, you saved my life that night. You don't know it, but I wanted to thank you. And what I heard Stockdale said to him at Unity was, what you don't know is that I was ready to give up that night. And when you guys called to me from down the hall, I realized I had to charge ahead.
Yeah.
And you saved my life. Is that a memory for you, sir?
No, because I wasn't in that cell block at the same time as Orson.
Oh, you weren't?
No.
Okay. All right. So I'll have to ask Orson about that. I just thought if you were
At least
there.
not to my memory. Orson wasn't in that block. It was.
Okay. So how was it that one of the first steps you took that was so brilliant, all of you, was you established lines of communication.
Yes.
You established leadership, who were the ranks of leadership, and then you established lines of communication. Yeah. How did that happen? Excuse me. How did that happen for you? I mean, I assume that someone got to you and started to give you how you were going to be able to communicate.
Oh, well, we didn't get too much on the communication end there while we were in Heartbreak Hotel, because we were talking when the guards weren't around. But I was there for maybe 2 or 3 weeks. And then they moved me to the camp called the Zoo, which was the primary camp at that time in November of '65. And there were half a dozen different buildings with POWs in, well, later, as there were more POWs. And I was put in the cell, and in the room next to me was Jeremiah Denton. And Denton is the one who taught me the tap code. I don't know where he picked it up, but he picked it up and passed it on to me. And then I was there through Christmas. I was there solo for 6 months or so. And then they moved me to another building and put me in with a Navy pilot. Actually, he was not a pilot at that time. He was a backseater, Rod Knutson. And I don't know if you want me to go, or do you want me to stay in this area for a while or not?
Whatever it leads you naturally, sir.
Okay, well, let me skip back. I skipped one phase before I moved in with Rod. They moved me to a different building that was larger and had, this is at the zoo. It was a large room, and there was just a wood bunk on a couple of concrete blocks is what you had. And there was a trap door so the guard could look in. And when I was there, started to first get an idea that maybe there was something to this tapping such that, and there was communication. And there was a PW, and I wish I could remember his name, and Mike McGrath from there, because Mike's got a great memory, and being a historian and such, I was really impressed because this POW, oh, damn, I can't remember his name, tilted his bedboard up on the wall and was able to do that and reach up, and there was a scuttle up there, and he was able to get in the attic. There was the POW in the cell next to him, I forget who it was, they weren't feeding him. And so this POW could get up there and pass a little bit of what he saved from his, a piece of bread or something, and pass it down to him. And it was really dangerous because Goo could open that door any time, and if they'd have found him up on that ladder, they'd have just beat the shit out of him. But that was one of the more, heroic things that were done initially.
I have heard that story, and we've actually, I think Ev Alvarez showed us a photograph of that room.
Oh, okay.
And it's a 14-foot ceiling.
Yeah.
And the remarkable thing,
That's a remarkable thing that he was able to do it.
and it was this little hole.
Yeah.
And he knew that the guy was starving, and was giving up hope, and he fed it down. And do you remember, Carrie, the name of the dude, Bill?
No.
I remember. I think it was Ev told us this story.
Yeah.
And he dangled food down to him through a little tiny hole, like a lamp hole or something.
Yeah.
And remarkable story. I will find out the name of them.
Okay. Yeah. It's a true story. It happened while I was in that a few cells down.
Really, you were there.
Yeah.
Wow. It was. Well, let's talk about that a little bit, because there is the pain and the recovery one has to endure alone. That no one can do that job for you.
Right.
Like, whatever life throws at us, there's a certain amount we're going to do alone. And then there's some things that we have the help of others in. Like in this example, this man skinnying up this 14-foot wall somehow and getting in there and sharing what little food he had. And there were others, I think, who he had in the cell with him, I think, who gave food as well to him.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that place where you began to understand that you had the help, whether it was through the tap code or through just the physical proximity, being able to talk, that you had the help of others to endure this. You weren't going to go it alone. What did it mean to you?
Oh, well, that's a pretty simple question. You're in a room by yourself for 24 hours, 7 days a week. It's nice to have at least don't talk to someone and communicate and find out, well, who's in your room, what's the information, who else is in the building, who's the senior officer, or who's the senior person in the building. Do you have any information about the camp? The guys that were two in a cell, they could one could stand on the other's shoulders and they could look out, or you could lay on the floor and look under the door to see what action was going on in the camp. So it was a slow process, but it was a continuous process of trying to get information. And with the nice thing about the tap code, when the V would say maybe have a POW go out and sweep, also, he could sweep the tap code. Don't. And so we could pass information that way. And we're starting to get, or occasionally a note would be passed in a bucket. And anyway.
So as those avenues began to open up where you were communicating with each other, you began to have a sense of the organization within the camp.
Yes.
You all fought together a battle behind bars.
Right.
The war didn't end because you were prisoners of war.
No, and not at all. And the big thing was names. to get names. Wanted to, to find out names of everybody that was in the camp, and occasionally they would move a POW from one camp to another camp, and he'd bring the names in from that camp. So the names were a big factor. And there's an area that I don't know whether you should get into or not. Well, I can tell you, and that is the code as far as why the Sante Raiders were not, when they went to the raid, they were already gone, the prisoners, because of the time delay there. And the communication came in because some of the POWs were allowed to write letters. And there was a code that was given out. This is top secret type stuff here, which I feel safe. That when a POWs there were only a few that when they went through survival school, I don't know how they picked them, but they just randomly, they would tell them this code. So if you ever got to write a letter, you can use this code, and we can respond to you in the code. Of course, it was very slow because sometimes months would go by between a letter going and a letter coming back. But that's how the word about Sante got out. But then the reason that it was so long delay and such, as far as, well, they had moved the period over, they didn't get the word. But that was how some of the names were starting to get out, and so.
I never heard that particular part of the Sante raid. Now it makes total sense to me. Okay. I was aware, obviously through Stockdale's book, that there was clandestine communication going on right. between right. the wives and the husbands through some of them. And we did interview Bob Shoemaker,
okay.
who was really, but he, like yourself, he didn't
he's a smart guy. What are you interviewing a dumb Marine for after interviewing Bob?
You know what, you're a delight, absolutely a delight. Let's talk about James Bond Stockdale. Like
007.
007. Let's talk about Stockdale, his leadership. How were you aware of it? Like,
he was the Air Wing commander on the Oriskany. That's the first time that I had come into contact with him, and he was a good commander. He took all the flights. He didn't just take the easy stuff. He took the hard stuff, as proven by the time they were shot down. But he would give a talk to the troops, us and such. It would be a very good. But sometimes he's a very intellectual and a philosopher, and he'd get into philosophy sometimes. We'd leave the talk and say, what the hell did he say?
Epictetus.
But he was very well liked and very well respected.
Give me, if you would, sir, some examples of what impressed you about his leadership.
Well, it was smart coming up with stuff like, don't give the V anything for free. As far as if they want something from you, say no. But take some torture, but only up to the point where physical damage, and then give them a lie and get out from under it. But you don't have to take it to the end, because it's not going to work. So that was a realistic type of, you're still resisting, but you're not resisting to the point of permanent damage.
And as a young officer who went through being put on the ropes and being forced to give up more than name, rank, and serial number, feeling like you had personally failed, what did it mean to you when Stockdale, because Stockdale basically rewrote the military code of conduct at great danger to himself. He did not know that he would not be court-martialed upon his return for making those changes. Right. But what he felt was that his men on the ground needed him,
Yep.
and they needed a realistic.
Yeah.
So, what did it mean for you personally when these changes were made?
Well, it was realistic. It made sense. You know, it was really the only thing to do. You know, because like there was one people, no names here, that he reached it so far that he went out of his head, and he gave a whole hell of a lot of information that he could have given a few lies and gotten out from under. So, you know, there's the other aspect of taking it so far that you go out of your head and then you spill everything, or you maintain control and give him a few lies. So there's two sides of the book there.
So this is an important aspect. One of the things about feeling like you could resist and you were immune to any level of pain is that when you're finally broken under such tremendous pain, you could spill far more that way than...
Well, yeah, and you know, the thing about it is that you know you're not going to go home. You know, you go to survival school and they put something on, you know it's going to be over with, you know, but when you know that it's not going to stop until you do something, and you have to do it because they aren't going to do it, you know, that you reach a point there, it's just common sense. Well, hey, this, you know, this can go on forever, and I ain't going to be able to take it forever. Or you go insane, which was a damn tragedy.
Right, right. And talk to me about when did you know that taps were coming down that were directly from Stockdale? Was there a certain way that they coded?
No, just password. But you know, I don't think the Gooks ever got onto the tap code as far as how it worked. And
well, they could never figure out shaving a haircut.
oh, you're right.
And
That.
the other thing about
Yep.
the other thing about the tap code that was made it so difficult for anyone to I mean, I've looked at translations of a conversation between two former POWs, and I can't translate it even when it's translated because there's so much shorthand.
Oh yeah, they
It's like
TY and for they and you know everything. Well, you had to.
It was all abbreviated. So
Right.
at that certain point, and then additionally, as some have described, it becomes very difficult even for one of you listening to two people tapping because they're doing the two rapids every time they anticipate. So
Right.
now you're
Right. Yeah.
so tracking it is very
Yeah,
difficult.
right.
But Ev was talking about how the Vietnamese would attempt to trick you by tapping through the wall, but they could never figure out the shave and haircut, so you guys would never answer.
Right.
And it was.
Yeah. You know, they never tried to trick me, or if they did, I didn't know it. But no.
Uh-huh.
But generally, you knew who was in the shell next to you, and so then there's a certain way that they responded. So.
Your father was a master chief, and
Yes.
so that's the highest ranking enlisted. So
Well,
and
he was a chief. I don't know about master chief.
master. He was a chief.
He
so,
was a chief.
But as you account, he is one of the lessons he taught you was respect for the enlisted. That these are the people who.
Yes, right.
And so speak to me, sir. You were not all officers in the North Vietnamese camps. There was one young enlisted.
Doug Hegdahl.
Talk to me about Doug.
Okay. Well, he happened to move in when he first got there in the cell next to me. And we taught him the tap code. And we found out about how he ended up there. You know, if he was aboard this destroyer and it came close to shore, and all of a sudden he was down below and he came up on deck and it made a sharp turn, and you know, far enough that, and it threw him overboard. And some North Vietnamese fishermen picked him up, and here he's this young teenager, enlisted man, ends up in a cell in Hanoi. But Doug turned out fine. He's the one that was told to memorize all the names, which he did, and was told to go home early, which he did so we could get the names out. Again, names were so important to, you know, so that POWs couldn't just disappear, that we could hold the V accountable for all of us.
Yeah, Doug is one of those remarkable stories. We really hope he's going to be willing to be interviewed. So far, we haven't gotten any word back from him, but we hope he's going to say yes.
Well, if he doesn't give me a call, and I'll talk to him and tell him Carrie's really pretty.
Okay. Okay. I love that. Thank you. We will call upon you to ask to try to pressure him. So we've talked about let's a little bit more about CAG. Is there at any point were you because he was separated into Alcatraz at a certain point,
Right.
and did you feel the absence of him at that point when?
No, because we had this senior person in the camp, senior person in the building, and communication was, it was communication, but it was still slow. And so I don't know. I wasn't trying to think of a camp I was into. I don't think I was in a camp with him, except the Hanoi Hilton. I mean, not the Hilton, but the Heartbreak Hotel. And after that, I wasn't in the same building with him. So he was, fortunately, I was just a dumb little captain there. I wasn't, a lieutenant commander or captain. They were more dangerous criminals and such. The higher the rank, the more the shit that they took. The lower the rank, the less tended to be less.
And it's fair to say, I believe, that when you were first shot down, there was not as much of the emphasis on torture going on. That's sort of ramped up with time, right?
Yes, it did ramp up in time. When I was in in Heartbreak, there was only one there that had been tortured, and they were sort of surprised about that. But then it really wrapped up, and it really got vicious. So.
Because the Vietnamese shifted their focus from trying to get intel to trying to get propaganda, correct?
Helicopter incoming.
Oh.
Yeah.
This is pause for a moment.
We're going to pause for a second while the helicopter.
Right.
By the way, we've been at this almost an hour. If you want to take a little break for a bathroom,
Yeah, I could take a drink of water.
yeah, let me.
It's right beside you in your chair.
Hold on one second. I'm gonna. I gotta cut sound before we do that.
Oh, I need to stand up. Oh.
I have water right here, but do you want to use the bathroom as well?
No, great.
Pulling you around in case you make a break for it.
Okay, let me do that. Let's switch here. Okay, that's cut. Let me cut the.
Why don't we unhook it and give it a chance